question.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our World Krill Day webinar. Thank you for joining us today. We are so pleased to be celebrating Antarctic krill today, which are a very important species in the Southern Ocean. And as some of you will know, many of the species in the Southern Ocean are dependent on krill for their survival, including more well-known species like penguins and seals. Therefore, it's very important that we understand and protect them so that we can protect all the animals that live in Antarctica. I hope you will enjoy learning more about krill today, and thanks again for helping us to celebrate these heroes.
Thank you, Claire. So now let's begin with the first presentation by Dr. Emma Cavan, who is not here with us, unfortunately, but we will play her video instead. And after her talk, we will play another very cool krill video produced by Pew Trust. So let's play it.
How wonderful krill are, really. So my research is all about. Hi everyone, my name's Dr. Emma Cavan. I'm a research fellow at Imperial College London. I'm really excited to be here for this moment for a long time, and really grateful to ASOC and for the Citizen Institute of Environmental Studies for having me here today to talk to you about how wonderful krill are, really. So my research is all about understanding how life in the ocean, so that could be plants or animals, have a role in circulating nutrients and carbon, and mostly particularly I'm interested in how animals can sink carbon to the deep ocean. And my favourite animal that I research a lot, as you have guessed it probably, is the Antarctic krill. So I'm going to focus specifically on why that is from the carbon story. And this image that I'm sharing with you today is from a paper that I published with some amazing co-authors and was also co-funded by the Pew Trust. It was all about the role of Antarctic krill in biogeochemical cycles. So I just want to take you through a few different things. So biogeochemistry is just that interaction between biology, which is the bio, and then geochemistry is kind of the nutrient cycling and carbon. So this is a schematic of the Southern Ocean. So we have kind of more of the open Southern Ocean on the top left, and towards the sea ice and the Antarctic continent on the right, and then going with depth from the surface to the deeper ocean. And these green patches on the surface ocean are phytoplankton. So phytoplankton are single-celled algae that grow in the surface ocean, and they convert dissolved inorganic carbon, so essentially dissolved CO2, into organic carbon through photosynthesis, just like plants do on land. And so it's the phytoplankton that are the key fixers of CO2 into this organic matter, like a leaf or just like our bodies are organic matter. And then krill come along, so hopefully you can see my pointer here. Krill come along in the surface ocean, and they can, even though krill are quite large, you know, the size of your little finger, they actually can graze these microcelled algae. But as krill are grazing these algae down, so you might have less phytoplankton, there's evidence to show that by krill grazing, they actually can release key nutrients that phytoplankton needs. So these are things like ammonium, which you might want to put on your compost, and also iron, because iron can be a really limiting nutrient in the ocean. And by releasing these two nutrients, then this can further stimulate phytoplankton growth. And so actually in some parts of the Southern Ocean, you can have high phytoplankton and high numbers of Antarctic krill, even though the Antarctic krill are consuming the phytoplankton. So this all helps with the cycle of carbon as well, because if there's more phytoplankton, then there's more CO2 being drawn down. But that's not the case everywhere, because there are other parts of the Southern Ocean where Antarctic krill can really very quickly consume down phytoplankton. But when this happens, And this can happen particularly when there's huge swarms of krills. They can swarm in their billions, and we think even maybe trillions of individuals, a kilometers squared kind of size of the ocean they can take up. And I can't even comprehend it. I've never seen it, but I'd love to one day. But anyway, these huge swarms of krill, obviously if they're grazing on phytoplankton, feeding on phytoplankton, they also then will, after some time has passed, release a fecal pellet and do a poo. And the cool or interesting thing about these fecal pellets from Antarctic krill is they're actually encapsulated in a kind of membrane, so they kind of come out looking a bit like a sausage, obviously a small sausage, and kind of they're actually in a chain of sausages. And these fecal pellets chains can sink really quickly to the deep ocean, sometimes hundreds of meters per day. So it can take, if the ocean is a few thousand meters deep, then it might take a week for them to get there. And not all of the fecal pellets will make it to the deep ocean, because some will be eaten on the way down by other things like fish or other krill or other invertebrates, or when they get to the seafloor they might feed the life that lives on the seafloor. But a huge number, particularly from a swarm, will get down to the deep ocean and store carbon there, because once that fecal pellet has got down into a certain water, deep water depth, and it's not going to come back up to the surface for at least 100 years, then that is sequestered carbon. So Antarctic krill are really important in that sink of carbon. And we also, so that's kind of what this is showing here, where we've got these krill grazing the surface and then sinking fecal pellets to the deep ocean. And the last thing I want to highlight is near the sea ice. Sea ice is really important for Antarctic krill because it's where larval krill, so really baby krill, and juvenile krill, so younger krill but beyond larval stage, it's where they kind of hang out. And it's also where a lot of Antarctic krill spend their winter. And that's because sea ice has lots of algae on the bottom of sea ice, and that's a really good food source for Antarctic krill, particularly the younger Antarctic krill, and as well as giving them protection from certain predators. But and the thing that's interesting about the sea ice is the larval krill actually go on quite extensive vertical migrations. So they might come up to feed in the surface and consume that sea ice algae, but then dive and actively swim a few hundred meters deeper later, in the daytime. So they kind of hide in the deeper, darker ocean in the day, and they come up to feed at the surface at night, consume that sea ice algae, then go back down again a few hundred meters, and at that depth they might release a fecal pellet, but also respire, releasing CO2, and it's kind of shunts that carbon from the surface into the deeper ocean very, very efficiently. And actually larval krill kind of do these quite extensive migrations on a way that's more predictable and maybe more important in terms of the carbon cycle than adult krill, but we don't know that for sure. We kind of, based on what we do know, that's what we think is happening. And so with sea ice loss, it can be quite worrying, both for the recruitment and the availability of there being larval krill that can turn into adult krill for the next year, to continue on as adults sinking fecal pellets, but also because of them undergoing this DL vertical migration. And sea ice is really important for Antarctic krill to survive, essentially. And the other thing is that Antarctic krill are fish, and so it's important that we kind of understand this carbon and biogeochemistry cycles and how much carbon they can sequester, so we can revisit things like fishing quotas and marine protected areas. So I hope that's been an interesting insight into this other kind of mechanism that krill can do, and why they are useful to humans, and why we should just leave them as they are very happily and not disturb them in the ocean. All right, thank you very much, and happy World Krill Day, everybody. Bye.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I did. Now we are playing the next one.
Surrounding the continent of Antarctica, the Southern Ocean makes up only 10% of the global ocean, but it plays an outsized role in the fight against climate change. It is one of the largest regional ocean carbon sinks for atmospheric CO2. This is partly due to Antarctic krill, the largest species within an order of small crustaceans at the center of the food web. Algae store carbon from the atmosphere during photosynthesis, and krill swarms feed on algae near the surface of the water. Then krill swim down to lower depths, and their carbon-filled waste drops down to the water at the bottom of the ocean. And when krill are eaten by predators, including humpback and blue whales, that carbon stays in their bodies for decades as a carbon sink, until they die, sink to the seafloor, and are consumed by deep-sea organisms. In effect, krill are a giant conveyor belt, constantly moving carbon from the surface down. Swarms of krill can number in the trillions of individuals, and when you take their impact in the Southern Ocean as a whole, the carbon they store in the deep ocean is the equivalent of taking 35 million cars off the road every year. Unfortunately, krill and the species that depend on them are under increasing threat, both from climate change and fishing to produce luxury products, including animal feed for farmed fish and krill oil supplements. As a planet, we have to act to protect krill, the ecosystems they uphold, and their critical role in climate change mitigation. Krill are much more valuable in the ocean than out, but to protect them, we need to protect their home. To learn more, visit pewtrust.org/southern-ocean.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Now, the next speaker is a very well-known krill scientist, Dr. So Kawaguchi. So I will turn it over to you, So. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Yoon-hee. My name is So Kawaguchi, and I just want to thank the opportunity to give a talk at the first World Krill Day. So I'm really excited about it, and I especially would like to thank the Pew for making this happen and taking the lead and so on. Well, I will just share my screen. Okay, and does this look good?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. So what I'm going to talk about today is the impact of climate change and ocean acidification on Antarctic krill and its ecosystems. So I just want to highlight how significant krill is, and then I talk a bit about krill and sea ice, and then climate change and ocean acidification, and finish with some summary. So krill biomass, how significant is it? We always say that it's the biggest biomass on the as a single species on the planet, and so on and so on. But how does it fit in the global biomass? So this is a paper by Baron, published in 2018. It actually is a really nice paper. And what it does is analyzed all the biomass on the planet and then put it into the context. So now you can see here, this is all the biomass on the planet expressed in carbon. So you can see most of the biomass on the planet is plants, and animals, just only tiny bit is animals. So you can see, this is a bit sidetracked, but you can see the importance of the primary productivity and the plants. If you wipe out plants from the forest, it would be very bad. Okay, so animals, only very small portion. Okay, and then if you look into this animal portion, it will be subdivided into this kind of thing. Now, the total animals are 2 gigaton carbon, and then half of them are actually arthropods, which is insects and crustaceans. Okay, and within this, krill biomass is 0.05 gigaton carbon. How does it compare with the other components? Humans, 0.06, almost equivalent. Okay, livestock like sheep and cattle and chickens, 0.1 tons, gigatons. But half of them is about almost a cattle. So krill is almost equivalent to cattle biomass on the planet. So this is quite significant. And the interesting thing is that the wild mammals on the planet, 0.007 gigatons. Actually, krill is 7 times more biomass than all the wild mammals on the planet. So you can see how significant krill is. And I just did a simple calculation, taking the how much proportion of krill are there in the animals. And simple calculation shows that 2.5% of combined animal carbon biomass on the planet is krill. So now you can be convinced that krill is quite important and significant in terms of biomass. Okay. So, and then because of that role and the biomass, they play really significant role in the Southern Ocean ecosystem. And the first speaker, Emma, has summarized really nicely about the importance of the krill in the geochemical cycle and how in the ecosystem. So I don't really want to go into the details on this, but just this figure shows that krill is the center of the ecosystem and also a target for the fisheries. Okay, so this is a picture taken by a diver, very typical krill associated with ice. And this pretty much, tells most of the parts of krill, not most of the parts, but, very, very sort of symbolic. So as Emma said, krill life history is closely linked with the sea ice. Winter sea ice acts as a nursery for young krill. So, the sea ice is not flat. It's really convoluted and there's lots of caves and canyons and so on. Larval krill hides within that. And then protect themselves from the enemies, and also eats lots of food in there. And then in the spring, as the sea ice melts, then that will stratify the ocean, and that will enhance the primary productivity, which provides a really good food for krill to grow and reproduce. So ice is really important, but climate change impacts on the sea ice dynamics, and this actually has a huge implication to life history of krill. It's quite obvious. So sea ice concentration, what's going to happen? So I took this figure from a bit old, but 2007 IPCC report, and you can see on the left-hand side almost current, and then 100 years later. If you compare, it's not obvious, but if you look at like Antarctic Peninsula area, the amount of ice expected is really, really low in 100 years. We'll see as well, and west part of East Antarctica, quite a dramatic decrease. On the other hand, Ross Sea, not much of a decrease expected, and also the this part is Antarctic as well. So there are, generally speaking, reduction in ice, but at the same time there are, lots of different, things going on. And also, it's not only about the amount of ice, but the structure and also the quality of ice is quite important, as I indicated in the previous slide. So this is into the future. We are worried about it, but also it's not only the future thing. And since 1979 to 2010, this paper shows the change of the ice cover days since then. So you can see in the Antarctic Peninsula area and also in the Indian Ocean sector, there are quite a purple-blue area where, you see the decrease of the sea ice days since then. And then on the other hand, some other areas are increasing. So the take-home message from this is, these changes are already happening, and there are differences between the areas as well. Now, I mainly talked about ice, but what are the other factors affecting krill life? So, like temperature. They do have a optimum temperature to grow. It's about 0.5 degrees. And if it's too high, then the growth will be not so great, as well as, if it's low temperature as well. So there's a sweet spot there. And also food amount. The more food, the better growth. And these things, we don't really know. Of course, temperature, if it's global warming, it will go up. But food, how does it, change into the future? Phytoplankton, production goes up or down, or there are some changes in species. So there are lots of things that we really need to know what may happen. But, so far what we have seen, this has been, published by the Angus Atkinson in 2019. Basically, in general, this is from the Antarctic Peninsula and the Scotia Sea area. The warming and ice loss in this Western Atlantic sector has led krill population in the area to contract south. So the habitat of krill has shrunk to the polewards. So basically, the number of krill in the northern end decreased, but the areas much more the south, they're not much the decrease. So there's a contraction, yes, of habitat because of the warming and ice loss. So that's, warming is all, happening because of the increased, emission of CO2 into the atmosphere. But warming is not the only thing that's happening. And also this actually acidifies the ocean as well, because the increase of CO2 will lead to the CO2 will dissolve into the ocean, and then because of that, the pH of the ocean gradually goes down, and depending on how much emission is controlled, the amount of the degree of acidification will change. Okay, so. And we really need to understand what this means to krill because, of the role of the ecosystem. So, to understand that, the best way is to do an experiment on these creatures and test how they respond in those future conditions. So it's, and that's something that we are really doing at Antarctic Division. Okay, So just to show, the history of aquarium study, so in the 1980s, it was like that in the freezer, very manual. Each krill were kept in each jar. But now it's more sophisticated. We can work in the room temperature. The water only is, cooled. All right, so we are fortunate to have this aquarium. So by using this, and we keep a krill and we can reproduce krill. So what we did was to test how the krill may hatch in different conditions, acidification conditions. So this is the kind of setup. So on the left-hand side, you can see this equilibrator of the CO2. So we can manipulate the CO2 level. And then once we get the krill eggs spawned, we will distribute into the individual jars and then put it into different levels of CO2. And then after 7 days or so, we will count the hatch rates. So this is how it turned out. So hatch rates of the eggs will rapidly decrease once it goes beyond 1,000 ppm microatmosphere, so PCO2. Okay, and this is almost equivalent to like pH 7.8, 7.7, something like that. Now, what this means, so krill lay actually sinking eggs. So krill eggs are spawned in the surface. They sink down to about 700 meters, 800 meters, and they develop as they sink. And the problem is that when they sink, they will experience the series of environment. And even now, the CO2 level of the in the around 200, 300 meters, it's already 600 ppm or something like that. And in the future, what may happen is that it's projected that it will go up like 1,300 or 400 PCO2 if the emission is not mitigated. So 1,300, 400, if you look at the graph at the left-hand side, you will instantly know that that will be a problem. So based on those informations, we came up with some risk maps for the future condition. This is the in 2100 when no mitigations are made. So the result was that if the emission is not mitigated, most of the crew could suffer at least 20% lower hatch rates. Lower hatching success by 2100. And in some parts, like Middle Sea, it might go down, reduced by 60 to 70%. So this is quite a significant thing. And if that continues into the future, like for another 200, 300 years, almost the entire habitat might not be suitable for reproduction if it's not the emission is not mitigated. So that's the eggs. But what about adult krill? So we also did some experiments using adult krill. Measured the body pH while changing the seawater pH. And what we found out was that even if the pH of the seawater was lowered, the body fluid, the blood of krill, doesn't go as much low as the seawater. So they are capable of regulating the internal pH. So the effect is not as great as the the early life stages. So they are able to modulate their body fluid pH to sustain their physiological processes, but there's a cost. So by doing so, they are burning lots of energies to do that. So they may not die at that point, but they are using lots of energies. The other thing, important thing that we need to remind ourselves is that anything that we do has a optimum temperature. Like we like about for humans, 20 degrees is a really good with temperature, and then if it's higher, it's hot. Lower, it's cold, and the performance comes really high at the sweet spot. And what this graph shows is that under increased CO2 level, this the performance, optimum performance will shrink. So basically, the tolerance range of the thermal tolerance, I'd say, for the performance will narrow, and then also decrease. So the effect of CO2 is sort of works as a synergistic way. So combined effect of carbon dioxide increase and then temperature would cause unknown effect for the krill. So I just thought that krill is fascinating, of course, but what makes krill so special in the Southern Ocean ecosystem? And you can, if you look at this this picture of krill, it's a typical swarm or school, and krill is actually heavier than water. So they have to swim to make this ball. And if they stop swimming or get tired, they cannot, perform like this. The prime reason for why krill is so valuable food for whales and penguins is because of this behavior, because of this nature of tight schools. If they cannot swim or perform as usual, that will have a really, impact on the interactions of the between the animals and krill, because if the krill cannot form these kind of balls, it's not as attractive food as it is now. So increased temperature, increased CO2, they will require more energy to swim, and that may have a kind of an impact on the interactions of prey and predator interactions in the future as well. So that's a subtle thing, but may have a really huge impact as well. So just to summarize, hatching success of krill eggs in some parts of the Southern Ocean could be negatively impacted. And also the cost of living, the energy that you need to consume to live in the high CO2 world is likely to be high for krill. So we don't have much information at the moment still. So more study is needed, especially for the behavior as well, because that is the first point, break point of the the interaction between the with the whales and penguins and krill. So combined effect is quite important, and also it's really hard to predict what exactly may happen, because into the future it's really hard to there are lots of uncertainties, but so we really have to understand this physiology and behavior and distribution of krill, and that we, as I said, combined effect of CO2 and temperature is quite important to understand. Now, I'm not too sure how am I going with the time. Sorry. So this is just to illustrate the things that's now happening. This is again in Atkinson 2019 paper. I won't go into the details at all, but the important thing is that there are lots of, things that we came to know now, like what is a likely reason for it. I think this is really, done because this area is a data-rich area. And what I wanted to point out is that all these things is mainly coming from one part of the Antarctic Ocean, Southwest Atlantic sector. And because this is a data-rich area, fisheries going on, and lots of national programs are doing the work. But the other side of the Antarctic, it's not much surveyed yet. So it's as I indicated in the earlier slides, the things of the change of the sea ice and everything is not uniform around the Antarctic. So we really need to make much more effort into the other areas as well to get a holistic understanding of the impacts. So to summarize, the krill biome is huge, and krill evolved to flourish by adapting highly dynamic seasonal cycle of the Southern Ocean. And warming and ice loss in Southwest Atlantic sector has already led to krill habitat to contract southwards in the Southwest Atlantic. Krill are vulnerable to change and ocean acidification, and this has consequences not only to its population but also to the wider ecosystem. And trends and rates of environmental changes are not uniform across the Southern Ocean. And majority of the information on this climate change impacts is coming from the Southwest Atlantic sector. But to get a holistic view of what's happening in the whole of Antarctic, the information from other parts of the areas needs to be gathered in a strategic manner to understand climate change impacts of krill and krill ecosystems at the circumpolar scale. It might have been a bit long, sorry to that it take a bit of time, but thank you very much. This is the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, So, for the excellent presentation. This is very informative and educational, so thank you. And our next speakers are Ms. Nikki Bransome and Mr. Jilian Chen. Please welcome Nikki and Jilian. I think Jilian goes first, right? So please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Uni. Can you hear me? Happy World Krill Day, everyone. So my name is Jilian Chen. I have been working on the conservation of the Southern Ocean for about 10 years, and I'm still fascinated by the new findings of krill. So today, I'll really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the management of the fishery of the Antarctic krill and its challenges with my colleague, Nikki Bransome from Bertarelli Ocean Legacy. So I will first give a broad view of how krill is fished, used, and the management structure of the krill fishery. Then Nikki will get into the details of the conservation measures to see the challenges. Next. So the Food and Agriculture Organization assigns numbers to different major fishing areas, and the fishery areas surrounding Antarctica are the area 48, 58, and 88. This chart shows the historical catch of krill and their distribution among those areas. You can see that area 48, which is the area facing the Atlantic Ocean, is the area that's produced most of the catch. Next. So who is fishing there? This chart shows the catch by 6 top krill fishing countries. The first peak was caused by the Soviet Union in the 1970s and 80s. They stopped krill fishing when the Soviet Union collapsed, and Japan has maintained a limited interest in fishing and then gradually reduced it. In the last two decades, new interest from Norway and China has been developing. You can see their catch is growing recently. Next. This is the most recent catch of the top 5 krill fishing countries. During the COVID period, most of the countries catch more or less maintained, but China has doubled its catch because of its newly launched fishing vessel with cutting-edge technologies similar to the Norwegians. So let's talk about the technologies. This is the conventional way to catch krill, which use a big net we call trawl dragged by the vessel. So the fish catch pulled to the vessel. Then this is the new technology that was developed by the Norwegians. It is now also applied in the newest Chinese vessel. It uses a pump to suck krill from the swarm. It is a very efficient way to catch krill, and it also prevents the bycatch of other animals. One key technology for fishing krill is the quick processing when the catch arrived on board. Otherwise, the krill will deteriorate very quickly, become commercially usable. Next. So why we are fishing for krill? Here are the 2 charts about the krill supply chain. The krill fished by the Norwegians were normally exported to North America to produce krill oil, a kind of nutrient supplement, and then supply the world market. Krill caught by the Asian countries is mostly shipped into China and Korea to make krill meals and also oil. China is aiming to develop its own krill oil industry. Next, you can see that China is one of the important hubs of the krill supply chain. The krill meal supplies the aquaculture industry in China and in other countries. Next, here are some of the products you can see on the market. On the left hand, you can see the krill oil product. Normally, you can buy it from the pharmacies, and the right hand are the krill meal, normally used for the fish farms and the private fish tanks. So next, remember the historical catch of the krill. There's a deep drop of the Soviet krill catch. At the time, the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources was established to manage the krill fishery in the Southern Ocean. It is an international organization established by the Antarctic Treaty members. Next. Next. Here is the meeting room of the commission before COVID. There is only one conversation on the plenary, but many parallel conversations on the different Skype group chats of each delegations. Next. This organization applies a structure of decision-making that uses the best available science to making policy decisions. Different data from Antarctic research and the fishing vessels will be analyzed in the science process, which is the scientific committee, includes 2 working groups. The scientific committee will provide policy recommendations for the decision-making body, the commission, to decide. So the politicians at the commission will make decisions, so-called conservation measures, based on consensus. which means every country needs to agree. So there are different kinds of conservation measures. Regarding compliance, the Commission uses various data to assess the compliance of each vessels to the conservation measures. Different states, including flag states and the port states, they have different roles and the responsibilities to ensure that every catch landed was caught legally. Next. Fishing in the Camelot area is so-called Olympic fishing. Once the fishery is open, every vessel comes in and every registered vessel comes in and starts fishing. Once the total allowable catch was reached, once the total catch has reached a level close to the total allowable catch, all vessels will stop fishing and leave. So this is the trigger level of 620,000 tons as the de facto total allowable catch in the area 48. This is called trigger level because it triggers the stop of fishing directly. So this is a highly productive area. There's a lot of other wild animals living there. So concentrated fishing may cause strong competition with those animals. Then Camelot came up with a measure to disperse these allowable limits into different sub-areas. So these are the current allocation of the percentage of the trigger level into the 4 sub-areas of the area 48. So yeah, now I give the floor to my colleague, Nikki. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. So Jillian explained to us how CAMLR currently manages the fishery. And I'd like to ask the question of whether or not management is currently effective in protecting krill and krill predators as required by Article 2 of the CAMLR Convention. As Jillian showed with one of his first graphs, when the fishery first started, fishing was spread all around the Antarctic continent. However, in recent years, all of the fishing has moved to the Atlantic portion of the Southern Ocean around the Antarctic Peninsula and Scotia Sea, and the fishing there is concentrated in even smaller areas. To really illustrate that, I wanted to present some catch data from recent years from sub-area 48.1, which is the management area right around the peninsula. Within this region in recent years, these 2 smaller subunits, the Bransfield Strait East and West, received 74% of the catch for the whole sub area. But the problem with this is that these 2 units only make up about 8% of the surface area of this region. So this is leading to excessively concentrated fishing in a really small area. And this is not only an issue in the peninsula, it's happening in the other areas where the fishery operates and to a greater degree. In the South Orkney Islands fishing area, 96% of the catch is coming from less than 2% of the region by area. And near South Georgia, 95% of the catch is coming from less than 6% of the area. So there's systematically an overestimate of the amount of krill available to the fishery in these smaller areas and the amount the predators can spare. So what does this mean for predators? Well, research that was published in 2020 has shown that krill fishing at these current levels and concentrations, combined with climate change, has had negative impacts on penguins in the Antarctic Peninsula region. And this goes against CAMLR's mandate of allowing fishing that does not have negative long-term impacts on the ecosystem. So what solutions exist or can be put into place to deal with these issues? CAMLR is considering development of a new ecosystem-based management measure that's based on a 3-part scientific work program being implemented by CAMLR scientists. The first part of the program is to collect an estimate of biomass, or the total amount of krill out there, and this is based on acoustic surveys of the region. The second part is a stock assessment, which is a model that shows how the krill population changes over time and what % of that population can be fished in order to maintain a robust krill population. And then finally, a risk assessment is the tool that CAMLR scientists are using to consider how much krill predators actually need to eat and how to spread that krill catch out in space and time to limit impacts on predators. Marine protected areas, or areas of the ocean managed to conserve nature for the long term, are another solution that CAMLR is considering. MPAs can produce positive ecological outcomes, including increased biodiversity and species densities. And by minimizing other threats, MPAs can build ecosystem resilience in the face of a changing climate. In addition, protected areas can lead to economic growth through tourism. Finally, MPAs are powerful tools that can support healthy fisheries. When an MPA protects a major source of a fish or krill population, spillover of larvae, eggs, and adults from inside the MPA can increase the abundance of fish species in areas open to fishing outside of the MPA. So for this reason, MPAs can be thought of as a sort of fish savings account. Noting the value of MPAs, in 2011, CAMLR agreed by consensus to create a network of large-scale protected areas. And they codified this into a conservation measure, which provides a framework to create that MPA network. This map shows the existing and proposed MPAs in the Southern Ocean, both in the CAMLR waters south of 60 degrees, as well as the waters managed by individual countries north of 60 degrees. The two existing CAMLR MPAs are the South Orkney Islands MPA, which was designated in 2009, and the Ross Sea MPA, which was designated in 2016. There are also 3 CAMLR MPA proposals currently under consideration for the East Antarctic, the Weddell Sea, and the Antarctic Peninsula. The Antarctic Peninsula MPA proposal in particular would protect the ecosystem adjacent to where the krill industry is currently operating. And several research studies have actually shown that the proposed MPA would benefit krill predators, and the fishery, even as the climate continues to warm. In addition to adopting the solutions which CAMLR has been considering, there are additional future challenges to the krill fishery for CAMLR to consider. One of the biggest things is that CAMLR has a need to increase monitoring of krill and krill-dependent predators to ensure that fishing isn't having irreversible impacts. This is especially important if CAMLR were to allow any increases in catch limits. New monitoring would need to be accompanied by a robust research design and logistical support to conduct the research, as well as sustainable financing. And finally, based on what we heard from So, the next important step for CAMLR will be to explicitly incorporate climate change considerations into management of the krill fishery. So in summary, the fishery for Antarctic krill currently includes fishing by Norway, China, Korea, Chile, and Ukraine, with major products including omega-3 oil supplements and aquaculture feed. CAMLR, or the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, is the international body responsible for managing Southern Ocean fisheries, and is also responsible for ensuring that fishing does not have a negative and irreversible impact on krill or their predators. Fishing in recent years has become extremely concentrated in parts of the peninsula and Scotia Sea region, and combined with climate change, this is already causing negative impacts for the region's penguins. Solutions for krill and predator protection that CAMLR is considering are ecosystem-based management that spreads out the catch of krill and marine protected areas. And some future challenges for management of the krill fishery include acquiring additional monitoring data and incorporating climate change explicitly into management. And with that, I will stop and say thank you to UNHI and CIES and to ASOC for hosting this and for giving myself and Jilian the chance to present on these important topics on the first World Krill Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki and Jilian. This is very informative and important presentation. Now we proceed to Q&A session. I think there is one question in the chat. So the question is maybe for Dr. So Kawaguchi. What would cause the massive krill death that ended stranded on the land, like coastal areas? Right? Can you answer to that question? So.
Sorry again. What was the question? Sorry, I couldn't.
What would cause the massive krill death that ended up stranded on the land, like a coastal area, like a sudden massive krill death? Yeah. But
that's a very big topic. There could be various, reasons. But one of the things that I read on the paper, it's not in the Australia thing, but in the Antarctic, the melt of the glacier is and the water will carry lots of impurity and detritus, and that will clog up krill system, and that caused a massive the death of krill, and then were stranded on the beach. Yes, but there could be lots of reasons. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we have prepared some questions just in case there is not many. So maybe also Dr. Kawaguchi, again, what are the biggest gaps in our current knowledge of krill?
Biggest, and there are lots of unknown things, but I think in terms of thinking of the management of krill fisheries and so on, firstly, we don't really know much about the population dynamics of krill. Population dynamics is quite important because that is fundamental to where and when and how much you can catch krill from where. And krill is a pelagic animal, so floating around and swimming, and we don't know whether exactly which areas are connected and how they disperse and so on. And those population dynamics is really challenging, and that's one of the things that I would say, including that includes the recruitment, how the young krill recruit into the next generation, and we don't really have a good handle on that as well. So yeah.
Thank you very much for your answer, Dr. Kawaguchi. And next questions are for Nikki and Jilian. The first one is, what are the biggest challenge for scientists and policymakers in terms of protecting krill? And the second question may be like, what can the average person, like individual, can do to protect krill?
I'll take a stab at the first question. I think that CAMLAR is challenging because it's a body made of 26 members, 25 countries in the European Union, and getting 26 different members to agree to things can be a challenge. And that could be due to 26 different scientific opinions, or could be due to 26 different political opinions and the need to come to consensus. So that's one of the biggest challenges for CAMLAR, but also I think something that exists in probably all management organizations, even within one country, is communication and dialogue between the scientists and the policymakers. So the policymakers really being clear on what advice they need for the scientists, and the scientists making sure that they're answering the right questions, but also making that information accessible to policymakers. So really working on good scientific communication, but also international communication and diplomacy and willingness to work together in good faith for an internationally important goal, an internationally important area are some of the biggest recommendations for how CAMLAR's policymakers and scientists can address some of their challenges.
Okay, I'll try to answer the second question. I think first to I think it's the most important thing people can do is to get informed, to learn more about this species. I learned a lot by reading the book written by Steve Nichol on the curious life of krill. So and also participating in workshops if you are interested. And once you get informed, you could find your own ways to engage this issue. If you agree that conservation is important and you support MPA and you support ambitious climate change policies, you should openly express your support whenever you can. Yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you for the great answers. So, okay, now it's time to wrap up the webinar. I'd like to thank you all the excellent speakers and audience for joining us today. And thank you. Hope to see you all again at another event like this. And have a good day and good night. Thank you. Bye.
Happy World Krill Day.
Hi, everyone. Happy World Krill Day.
Bye.
Happy World Krill Day. Bye.
Thank you.